Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hey, happy Victoria Day to our Canadian viewers. Joyeux fête de la reine, as they say in French, because it's also the Queen's official birthday in the deranged Dominion of Canada. On tonight's Mark Steyn show, the cost of living is the cost of lockdown. Now that the Governor of the Bank of England has gone all apocalyptic and swivel-eyed, Jasmine Birtles will try to talk the economy back off the ledge and into the room. The NHS hotline is still redirecting us to their answering machine on Rock Hall. So we'll talk with the great Sue Cook about the victims of the vaccine, all but totally ignored by Britain's wretched groupthink media. Klaus Schwab's World Economic Forum is underway. So it's back-to-back limos and Learjets in Davos, but our man has managed to secure a parking place for his 1993 Vauxhall Cavalier, low mileage, slightly rusted. And remember that Aussie guy, ScoMo? ScoMo thought he'd go with the flow of the net zero globo, and now he's no mo. A portent of tomorrow for UK Tories. Plus your thoughts live and in real time. So do send them along by email to gbviews@gbnews.uk. You can tweet me at gbnews. First, as always, the news with Tamsin Roberts.
Mark, thank you. Good evening from the GB newsroom. Pictures have emerged appearing to show the Prime Minister at a gathering in Downing Street during lockdown. In the images obtained by ITV News, Boris Johnson is seen raising a glass in a room with a number of other people. According to the broadcaster, the image was taken on the 13th of November 2020. 8 days earlier, Boris Johnson had imposed England's second national lockdown. A spokeswoman for Number 10 said the Cabinet Office and the police had access to all relevant information during their investigations, including photographs. Meanwhile, Downing Street has confirmed the meeting between Boris Johnson and Sue Gray while she was investigating lockdown parties was first suggested by Number 10. Officials say they asked for a meeting to discuss the timings and publication process of her findings. Labour claims the meeting was an attempt to undermine the report. In other news, speaking today about the cost of living crisis, the Prime Minister says he's not in favour of introducing new taxes. But as pressure grows to introduce a windfall tax on oil and gas companies, Boris Johnson says no option is off the table. Speaking at a school in South East London, he suggested more support will be offered to help households.
I'm not attracted intrinsically to new taxes, but as I've said throughout, we've got to do what we can, and we will, to look after people through the aftershocks of COVID, through the current pressures on energy prices that we're seeing post-COVID and with what's going on in Russia.
A former Conservative MP has been sentenced to 18 months in prison for sexually assaulting a 15-year-old boy. Imran Ahmed Khan was expelled from the Conservative Party and resigned from the Commons after he was convicted last month. The 48-year-old carried out the attack in 2008. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says the world faces a turning point since Russia's invasion of his country. Speaking at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, Ukraine's leader urged countries to increase pressure on Moscow. He says all foreign businesses must leave the Russian market so they're not associated with what he called war crimes. The number of confirmed cases of monkeypox in the UK has risen to 57, health officials have confirmed. The World Health Organization says there's no evidence the monkeypox virus has mutated, but it expects to find more cases in countries where it's not typically found. Health officials in Scotland say a small number of smallpox vaccine shots, effective against monkeypox, have been stockpiled. The Queen's attended the Chelsea Flower Show a day before the event opens to the public. The 97-year-old monarch, who has mobility issues, was driven around the gardens in a buggy. She's attended the event more than 50 times during her 70-year reign. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Steyn.
The World Economic Forum is meeting at Davos. Who are they? Well, 50 heads of state and or government are there, many big-shot Saudi princes. The governor of the Central Bank of Ukraine, I think that's Hunter Biden, isn't it? He succeeded Chelsea Clinton, if I recall correctly. We will have a report from the scene a little later, but so far Klaus Schwab's Spectre board meeting is going great, and he seems upbeat and bullish.
Let's also be clear. The future is not just happening. The future is built by us, by a powerful community as you here in this room.
Is it just me, or is Klaus Schwab's sinister Teutonic accent getting more parodic? The future is built by us. Tomorrow belongs to me. I'm told he talks like Tony Blackburn off air. Hey, that's the big sound of world domination for you right here on Radio 2. But he was advised that the whiff of the old Prussian riding crop comes off better on camera. The future is built by us. Very good, Klaus. But don't forget the maniacal cackle. The sinister globalists were unable to release a new pandemic in 2021 because the 2020 pandemic was still going gangbusters, but this season's rollout is proceeding on schedule. Belgium becomes first country... I'm going to try and get through this with a straight face. Belgium becomes first country to introduce compulsory monkeypox quarantine. But don't worry, there's a vaccine for that. Jabba, 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 said the monkey to the chimp.
Dabba, 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 said the chimpy to the monk. Dabba, 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 said the monkey to the chimp.
Great stuff. Jabba, 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 jabba. Sir Keir Starmer is calling for the introduction of protective masks. Oh. If you don't like that design, it also comes in a ginger growler. The other story we've reported on multiple times is the new World Health Organization treaty, under which all the people who've ruined your life these last 2 years will be able to monkey with you all over again and again and again, because the future is built by us. What is the point of domestic politics if the future is being built by chaps at the Spectre board meeting on top of a Swiss Alp whom you can't go and vote out at any polling on Earth? As is traditional in such matters, the monkeypox only affects law-abiding citizens, so you'll have to quarantine, but don't worry, we'll still have open borders on the southern coast. The overwhelming majority of Tory voters, and in fact large numbers of Labour voters, want an end to open borders on the southern coast, but sorry, your views count for naught. Because of the European Court of Human Rights. We're told the European Court of Human Rights is a wholly owned subsidiary of the World Economic Forum. I think the Chief Justice on it is Klaus Schwab's second cousin once removed. And so it is that under a supposedly conservative government, Linton-on-Ouse in North Yorkshire is to be enhanced by the presence of 1,500 quote-unquote asylum seekers. 1,500 is actually close to double the population of the village, and as the quote-unquote migrants are all men, mostly young and frisky, they'll also significantly distort the sex ratio, making the neighbourhood about 80% male. If politics provides no means to adjust policy, then what is the point of politics? And just to bring it back to the so-called top story of the day, which bores me comatose, Boris Johnson being photographed with a glass only matters if Boris Johnson matters. And Klaus Schwab and co figure that Boris Johnson doesn't matter. And indeed, if you're in Linton-on-Ouse, he doesn't appear to matter either. That's the one thing Linton-on-Ouse and Davos have in common. Once upon a time, there was a supposed centre-right party. They'd been in government for, a decade or so, and they won their third prime minister. And like so many Conservative parties these days, they hadn't done anything in the least bit Conservative. On the other hand, they'd signed on enthusiastically to net zero, and come the COVID, they were very partial to giving it to you with a good, hard lockdown. And sure, the base was pretty cranky about it all, but let's face it, those losers have got nowhere else to go because the Labour bloke is so scary and left-wing. No, I'm not talking about Boris Johnson's Tories. I'm talking about Scott Morrison down under. He's out, he's gone, he's done. And it turns out in the end, the Labour bloke is certainly left-wing, but insufficiently scary to save Mr. Morrison and keep him in his job. As I always say, when the left wins, it's in power. When the right wins, it's in office. Which means that when the political pendulum swings, your average Conservative voter has nothing to show for a decade of, on the one hand, Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison, or conversely, Cameron, May, Johnson. I wouldn't want to overstate the comparison between Her Majesty's realms, north and south, because at least Mr. Morrison's ministry is capable of stopping the migrant boats, which is more than Mr. Johnson's can do. Alexandra Marshall is one of our sharpest commentators, and she joins us now live from Alberta, as we must learn to call it under its new leader. Okay, Alexandra, what happened in your great nation over the weekend?
Well, I thought I'd be coming to you from a southern province of China, but perhaps we're actually a state of the World Economic Forum. It's difficult to tell these days. But basically what happened was the Labour Party, who have formed government, who are quite socialist, have got the lowest primary vote of any Labour government since 1910. Both parties, Liberal and Labour, which is our Conservative Party and our Labour Party, have the lowest primary vote we've ever seen. And that is because they have led voters to both the Freedom Parties, who are all against this totalitarian regime we've seen, and on the other side, they've lost them to the eco-fascists in the Green movement. And this was an election win for the Green movement. Both the Greens and the Teals I warned you about last week, they are the big winners. We've seen the rich and wealthy and affluent areas of Sydney and Melbourne go over and vote to save the climate by putting in these high taxing socialist renewables barons. And that's what's happened. All these years of indoctrination in the school system has given us a generation of hard left Greens who have no idea what they voted for, but they've gone and done it all the same. So if there's a lesson to be had out of here for Britain,
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Alexandra.
I was going to say, if there's a lesson here for Britain, it's that don't let the Conservatives take the wrong line on climate change. Go ahead with environmentalism, but don't run this eco-fascist line. It will not work for you. You will lose out to the Greens eventually.
The joke about this, I was astonished because this was a name I hadn't actually heard in years, but he's the son of Australia's first billionaire, this young Holmes a Court chap. And for British people, if you went to the West End Theatre in London during the 80s and 90s. His mum and dad basically owned all the theatres in those days. So his dad and his mum were very successful. But the kid is one of these. He's like the ultimate trusty fundy kid. He put up a lot of sort of wealthy green ladies. Basically in metropolitan constituencies, and it's just incredible actually the way the voice of the now is the pampered son of Australia's first billionaire. I mean, how do they get away with this stuff?
Well, basically, they've made all the public, particularly the wealthy, feel guilty. It's a cult. It's basically a climate cult. So they feel so guilty about their wealth that their answer is to use the voting booth to save the planet, and therefore they can keep all their vehicles and their mansions and their private schools, and that's fine as long as they vote for repeal. They've done the right thing. They're a good person. And that's what this election was about. It was virtue signaling as being a good person. And in doing so, they've elected basically these, it's not even a real party. They've all got the same messaging, the same colour, the same financial backer, which, as you said, is Simon Holmes at Court. But they never declared themselves as a party. So now we've got all these teals, these wealthy, privileged, far-left Greens in our government, and they're going to be a nightmare.
We've just been looking at footage of your new Prime Minister taking the oath of office in front of the Governor-General, and you have this kind of wacky thing in Australia that we don't really have in Canada or many other parts of the Commonwealth, where basically the incoming Prime Minister can rewrite the oath to his heart's content. So the last chap took the conventional oath of allegiance to Her Majesty the Queen and her lawful heirs of successors. And this guy, Albo, just made it up as he went along and did some affirmation, pledging himself to whatever it was he was pledging himself to. I take it that's a bit of showboating, that he actually understands he hasn't got any real mandate here. Or do you think he's going to make, as the left-wing parties usually do, he's going to make the most of his time in power and get on with radical transformation?
One of the old Labor commentators slipped up on TV during election night. He said that Labor would have the ability to rule instead of govern, of course, which is the word we prefer to use. They see this as the opportunity to rule over us. And Albanese, we've only had about 40% counted when he was sworn in. And he's already on a plane off to Japan. So our wonderful climate god who's telling us we can't have cars, his first act as Prime Minister was to hop on a jet. So, you know, it's do as I say, not as I do, and that's going to be the entire theme of this new government.
The supposed successor to Scott Morrison actually lost his seat. So the question, as always, after a rout like this is, does the party reconnect with its supposed right-wing roots, or does it try appeasing the left even further? Because the appeasement never... You can sign on to net zero, but everybody knows that if you're hot for net zero, the Greens or the lefties or whoever are the party to vote for, and not a so-called Conservative party pretending to be Green.
Well, the heir apparent, as you mentioned, Josh Frydenberg, he was actually one of the heads of the left-wing faction, the so-called moderates in the party, who got wiped out completely in this election. So it's actually really great that he's gone, because Peter Dutton was meant to be the Prime Minister instead of Scott Morrison. But Scott Morrison got put into power and he was absolutely useless. So what you're seeing now is Australia having a leader of the opposition who was meant to be the last Prime Minister. So he's one to watch. He's an extremely experienced man. He was Minister of Defence. He is the one who should have been leading the Conservatives in the first place. So he's not just being pushed in there, he is the real leader. And there is some hope for Conservatives that with him in charge, we will have a Conservative government again after this 3 years of absolute hell is finished.
Yeah, but the next 3 years, wait till the monkeypox mutates with the Omicron, there won't even be an Australia in 3 years' time, Alexandra. That's the world we're living in. But in the meantime...
For some reason, we're not taking it seriously. We just won't take monkeypox seriously. Australia's like, what do you want us to say? You know, we're just not going to do it.
No. Okay, wait till the dingo pox. That's the one that's going to do it for you. These are turbulent times, Alexandra. Thank you very much for joining us as always. And let me know what you think. I think there are lessons for the present attenuated, largely worthless Tory party in this. GB Views at gbnews.uk. We'll get to your reaction next. Plus, the cost of living with Jasmine Birtles, Sue Cook on the silence of the lockdown lambs when it comes to vaccine victims. We don't do Ginger Growlergate here. We do stories that will impact your lives. So, Labour members, you can cross your legs to your heart's content. We scoff at Ginger Growlers. Stick with us. Andrew Lawton is coming up live from Davos, where there's not a Ginger Growler in sight. We're coming right back.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hey, let's get to your take. Daryl says, Mark, do you think the mainstream media is scaremongering the hell out of monkeypox because they love a good story? It's not because they love a good story. There are all kinds of stories out there. I wish we had a media that loved a good story, because there are all kinds of stories out there, not least some of these bizarre side effects of the vaccines. That's a pretty good story, but it doesn't make the news. No, they're scaring the hell out of monkeypox for you because they want the panic porn to shut down the world for another 2 years. What have you mean? They love a good story. Brexit was a good story. It didn't mean they covered it honestly, did it? Trump's a good story. It didn't mean they covered him honestly. They love a good story. That was true in 1893. Alexi says, everyone born before 1971 will have received the smallpox vaccine, which is 85% effective against monkeypox. It's those born after that who are... Again, this is almost quaint. That's the old pre-COVID world. You know, yeah, oh yeah, that's fine. I've got no worries about the monkeypox. I got my smallpox vaccine in 1954. No, it doesn't work like that anymore because there's not enough money for big pharma in that. So you're going to have to sign on and get the new monkeypox vaccine. Bob says, I'm feeling asymptomatic. Me too, Bob. I'm totally asymptomatic. Well, wait a minute. Am I aptomatic? Am I asymptomatic? I don't know. I'm catching it. I'm reduced to prop comedy. It's pathetic. OK, do you like central bankers? We got no funny masks for central bankers. It's not like the monkey stuff. They're usually the chaps who, when the rhetoric gets a bit overheated and the markets get touchy, are wheeled out to say something measured and calming and temperature lowering, like that governor of the Bank of England who was all over the telly last week warning of, quote, apocalyptic food prices. He couldn't have been more reassuring than if he'd loaded up the helicopter with used fivers and taken off from the roof of the bank for exile in Costa Rica. If a central banker's gone all apocalyptic, what hope is there for you? Jasmine Birtles from moneymagpie.com has a big double-page spread in today's Mail. And today's Daily Mail, yeah, there it is, simple ways to shrink your bills. And she joins us now. Jasmine, I was reading that with great interest, and you were talking about how when you were a struggling person just out of university and the little part-time jobs you did and all that kind of thing, that sort of presumes the normality of our rulers. And the situation right now is so weird. I wonder if that's a safe way to bet. I mean, I think it was in The Guardian, they were saying that food prices are going to be equivalent to the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008. And that where that affected people who were invested in the market, this is going to affect people who are invested in whether they can get a loaf of bread and a pint of milk. In other words, it's going to be on a much wider scale.
Yeah, that's what we're being told. And as you say, usually with central bankers, they're wheeled on saying it's all right. And that's something they said last year. Do you remember? I think it was around about, September, October, the Bank of England said, inflation, it'll peak around spring at about maybe 4%, and then it'll just fizzle out. And then they went, well, maybe it'll be about 6%, and it might be a little bit later. And at the time I was going, no, it's going to be much more than that because of quantitative easing. And while we have a perfect storm, and it is quite irritating, as you say, to hear the governor of the Bank of England use words like apocalyptic and like it's nothing to do with him, when really much of this is because of him, because of the central bank, because of the insane amount of quantitative easing, money printing that they did during lockdown. Admittedly, they didn't come up with the idea of lockdown. That was government. You can give them the prize for that. But in order to keep things going, to pay this huge amounts of money to let people stay at home in furlough, they had to shake the magic money tree and produce enormous amounts of cash. And as Mervyn King has said, one of the former governors of the Bank of England, when you create insane amounts of money, but also reduce the amount of places where that money can go, and that's what happened during lockdown here and in other countries, you get inflation. And frankly, I think we're just at the start.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. 80% of all the US dollar bills in circulation were printed within the last 2 years. I mean, basically, the ink's still wet on them. That's how insane this situation is. But as you say, most of the things you could normally go and spend them on have been restricted and curtailed, and yet suddenly they're surprised that this is inflationary. Isn't it their job to note that's basically that's basically money 101, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And, we're hearing all sorts of excuses. I'm incredibly, occasionally on other media, I'm sorry, it just happens every now and then. And I was on a program on another station recently where somebody said, well, it's a global thing, you see. There's nothing that the bank can do about it. And I was thinking, no, actually, there is. For a start, different countries, even if you go to Europe, different countries have very different inflation rates. Malta has about 5%, 5.4%. Estonia has 19%. Turkey has 70%. Argentina's been a basket case inflation-wise for years. So it really isn't just, world conditions. And it certainly isn't because, what they're trying to blame, the Ukraine war. That's the cherry on the top. Absolutely, that is causing problems. But we were going to have rampant inflation even without that. And you're mentioning food. I'm wondering about this food inflation that we've been warned about for a while. There's something. It just feels like there's something odd going on. I'm hearing from farmers that they're being encouraged to not farm. They're being encouraged also to remove food crops and replace them with, I was going to say, anti-carbon, just energy-producing crops. And just at a time when we're being told that food prices are going up, shouldn't we all be being told, right, go and grow some more food yourself, and all the farmers, grow as much food as you possibly can? That you would think would be the right thing to say, and yet it seems to be the opposite, and I don't understand why.
All the stories have some kind of component such as that in them, Jasmine. In the US, where there's a huge baby milk shortage, that's because the government closed down the guys who were responsible for 43% of the baby milk. And so now they're having to have it flown into the country from Germany on military planes, which you would think would be a humiliation for a supposed global superpower. But all the stories, as you say, they have something mysterious at the back of them, where it's almost as if there's somebody trying to destroy all this stuff.
That's the way it feels, frankly, because there isn't enough reason for it. As far as I can see, the US on its own potentially could be the world's breadbasket if it wanted to. And what is also odd is that there are so many billionaires buying up farmland. I think, isn't it Bill Gates who's the biggest farmland owner in America? What do they know that we don't? It's an odd thing. When you've got small, medium-sized farmers being told, "Oh, don't bother, just sell it," and yet billionaires are not stupid. They're billionaires for a reason. So how come they're buying this up? So there seems to be an asymmetry of knowledge here, and some strange things going on that's causing apparent food shortages where it seems to me really they don't need to be. They really don't.
Well, you're right to point out that when Farmer Bill Gates starts buying up huge amounts of land, that is one of those apocalyptic dystopia scenarios where you flee from the city and you head to the hills and you hope you have a nice patch of land that you can grow stuff on. He's taken the equivalent of whole countries and bought them. It is almost as if those guys know something is happening and we don't. Thank you very much for that, Jasmine. This may be something more than just ordinary plain old 1970s type inflation, and there may be something more at the back of it. It's always great to see you. And on a related note, as we mentioned earlier, the World Economic Forum is taking place at Davos under the auspices of Klaus Schwab. As you may remember, Klaus Schwab is the twin brother of Ming the Merciless. That's Ming on the left there and Klaus on the right, I believe. And of course, The guy we were just talking about, that simple farmer in his dungarees with a straw between his teeth. Bill Gates is there too. Bill, let's have a look at Bill Gates. He's such a cute-looking farmer. Oh yeah, there he is. That's he's not Ming the Merciless. He's Man Boob the Merciless. Looking good there, Bill. How did a guy who's got man boobs that size become the global authority on public health? If ever there was a time to yell, "Physician, heal thyself," it's when those terrible saggy man boobs are coming towards you on the pavement. Meanwhile, who else is at Davos this year? Oh yeah, Cruella von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, is there. Here she is with St. Bob Geldof demonstrating how to pick up a bad dose of the monkeypox. Yeah, don't... She doesn't look like she's having fun there. And our man Andrew Lawton is also there. He was having schnapps with the Prince of Wales and Leonardo DiCaprio in the ski lodge while watching Frau von der Leyen do the mambo with Mohammed bin Sultan. But we've dragged him away and he joins us now live from Davos. How's it going with the globalists, Andrew?
Well, pretty good so far, Mark. They throw tremendous parties. You're not invited to a lot of them unless you have one of these coveted white badges with a blue line, which says you're someone important. If you're a white badge with no blue line, it means you're married to someone important. And then you have the orange badges for the press and different... It's actually hilarious. I'm badgeless. I'm completely badgeless, but I've been told that that's not necessarily a bad thing because some of the really, really important people are too good for badges. So they might think I'm like a Ukrainian oligarch by the end of the week and let me into the good parties.
Yeah, so you're basically like some operetta character where you're going around dressed as a peasant and people aren't quite sure whether you're really a prince in disguise. And so they might have to let you into the glamorous parties. What I found out odd about this is there is a real difference. I mean, the UK and the Australian delegations are quite small. But there are like tons of people from all the dodgy regimes in the world who are gathered there.
Yeah, there was an article, I can't remember who wrote it, but it was talking about the shortage of elites at this elite summit, and it was lamenting that they don't have any G7 leaders here. I saw some large security detail earlier in the day, and I was wondering who is that someone important? And then it was the wife of the president of Colombia. I found someone unimportant later on with an entourage, but that was Nick Clegg, who didn't want to take a couple of moments to chat with me, unfortunately. He was walking by the Meta/Facebook table, but it is quite significant. I mean, they have a panel later this week in which they've basically jumbled all of the Latin American heads of state they can muster up together.
No. Just let me stop you there. I wanna repeat what you have just said. This is the state of the world in 2022. Nick Clegg, and I take it you're referring to the useless UK Liberal guy who was David Cameron's deputy, unless there's another Nick Clegg who's fabulously successful. But you're saying this Nick Clegg now has an entourage. Are you kidding me?
No, he had, I think, a 4 or 5 person team with him, including 2 Swiss police officers who very quickly got between me and Sir Nick when I tried to ask if he could do a brief interview.
That's absolutely incredible. When you say, by the way, I mean, and I never, to be honest, I would never think this was going to be a problem. Nick Clegg throughout his life has never been the kind of guy who has needed people stopping people getting, I mean, he's not Madonna or whatever. So you're saying that Nick Clegg has an entourage, and I gather that some of these entourages have been getting a little heavy with some journalists and actually they've been detaining them.
Yeah, there was a story about that earlier on, and I haven't quite heard the details of it. But I think the fact that Nick Clegg is getting an entourage is indicative that they have no one else worthy of protecting this time around. They don't have anyone else here. I know Alex Sharma is here, and I believe he's the highest-ranking official from the UK. Canada has sent one lone minister. John Kerry is the leader of the US delegation. I mean, this is really the phone-it-in person Davos summit.
Well, that's amazing to hear. I mean, these guys have to go somewhere where they're taken seriously. John Kerry, Nick Clegg, because Nick Clegg is Deputy Assistant Under Vice President at Facebook or something now. But he rates he's rocking the entourage, and he's probably ahead of you in the line for doing the mambo with Cruella von der Leyen, Andrew. So we're going to let you get back to the all-night swingers parties that they like to do after the Spectre board meeting, and we'll check in with you as we hear any further developments. We can laugh at these guys, but these are the guys who make the decisions for the rest of you while you're talking about Vindaloo Gate or Cake Gate or Ginger Growler Gate. Thank you very much, Andrew Lawton, live from Davos. Great to see you. Stump the Steyn looms. GBViews at gbnews.uk, or you could tweet me at GBnews. Also coming up, one of the great glories of British broadcasting, Sue Cook is going to be back on the show, and I'm delighted to see her. Coming up.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question.
That's two questions, actually. That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Just as a postscript to what we were talking about there, at Davos, the Australian E-Safety Commissioner, that's small e, big S, because it's like an internet thing, is a bit Windows 9080, it's sort of old-fashioned internet, but Australia apparently, they shouldn't have an E-Safety Commissioner, God knows what that means, but Julie Inman Grant holds the job, and she told Davos today that we need a, quote, recalibration of freedom of speech, which means, according to Ms. Grant, that we need less of it. This is the way they talk at Davos. I'm delighted to welcome Sue Cook back to the show. Everyone knows Sue from Crime Watch and Children in Need and You and Yours on Radio 4. That's all about as mainstream as you can get. But if you follow Sue on Twitter, you'll see that she has somewhat parted company from the media mainstream with respect to victims of the vaccines. They're real and they're suffering, and their widows and children are suffering, but under what's that Australian lady call it? Under the recalibration of freedom of speech. Nobody seems to be talking about it much out on the internet or on the mainstream broadcasters. It's great to see you, Sue. These numbers, just from the yellow card, say 2,000 are dead and close to 500,000 have had adverse effects. So if it follows the normal proportions of self-reporting, that would mean maybe up to 5 million people have suffered adverse effects in the UK. You'd think this would be a story that some of our media would like to get into.
I don't even think it's about the numbers. Even if it was 5, it's really important that these people have taken the injection that was vaunted to the skies. They took one for the team. They had the injection. They weren't anti-vaxxers. This is nothing about being anti-vax. They took the vaccination and they've had horrendous, catastrophic side effects as a result. There have been, as you say, I think altogether 11 million adverse reactions across the US and the EU and 70,000 deaths. But that isn't really my point. I think the point is that we owe these people. As I say, they took one for the team and we owe them. There is so many, I've had some heartbreaking stories from people who've got in touch with me over this, all sorts of different adverse effects. There have been blood clots in the brain, of course, we all know about that because that lovely presenter Lisa Shaw died of that. There's been thrombocytopenia, which is a kind of low platelet count. There's something called POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is basically a blood circulation problem. I think that's it's a raised heartbeat, it's dizziness, breathlessness. You basically can't get out of your bed. You just feel too ill. There's Guillain-Barré syndrome. You don't know if I know you've done quite a lot of interviews already with so maybe you've probably heard of it. But that's a kind of ghastly peripheral neuropathy thing with muscle weakness and your feet and hands start and then it's the legs. I think Eric Clapton might have had that and he's been demonised as being anti-vax because he's not anti-vax, he had the vaccines. There's myocarditis and pericarditis and of course ultimately there's death, and I know you've interviewed those two lovely widows, Vicky Spitt and Charlotte Wright, wasn't it, who lost their husbands, and no compensation, not a single penny. They've been ignored, and that I think is unforgivable. And when COVID was actually the big fearmonger, all we heard was COVID, COVID, COVID. Shouldn't we equally hear for these people who've suffered as a result of taking the vaccination? We're not trying to make it scary. We're not trying to say don't have the vaccine. The vaccine has saved millions of lives probably, but we need to look at the lives of people who've been damaged. And it's very rare, there are very few of them, but they need full compensation.
The reaction, you mentioned Eric Clapton there, who actually, he suffered. He was in great physical pain. He's a famous person, so when he's interviewed on radio and TV, he mentioned that he hadn't been feeling too well. And immediately, this guy who's been a lion for half a century, you know, he just has to get out of bed and people are saying, what an amazing guy, he's fantastic, suddenly turned on a sixpence and he became a hate figure on the internet. Don't you find that a slightly weird reaction?
Slightly. I think it's absolutely extraordinary reaction, isn't it? And these people are really suffering. They're having a rotten time because they took the vaccine, and they're being demonized at the same time for being anti-vax. And of course they're not anti-vax, but they need acknowledgement. Boris promised back in August of last year to give them to look at the situation and see what he could do about the compensation. And since then, there's been complete radio silence and media silence. Nobody said anything about it. They haven't heard anything from him. I just think it's unforgivable. We owe them, we owe them big time.
Well, you noted that Sir Christopher Chope, who is one of the few parliamentarians to have even taken an interest in, I mean, there's a whole bunch of guys in the Commons and the Lords, and very few of them have even spoken up. And when they do, as with Christopher Chope, they're generally doing so to an empty chamber. And his bill hasn't even been scheduled for a second reading, which suggests, as he's in the governing party, that does suggest to me that the government itself is trying to just kick this into the long grass.
That's hugely disappointing, hugely disappointing. I know Baroness Hallett has said that she will include looking at vaccine damage and vaccine reactions in the terms of reference to the public inquiry, which is very important. But that still has to be ratified by Boris Johnson, so that still might not happen. And even if it does, how long is it going to take while these families with children, earnings no longer coming in, people are really suffering, and they need the money. The only existing legislation is the vaccine damage payment scheme, which was I think formulated in 1979, and for that you have to prove that you're 60% or more disabled, which is a extremely difficult and subjective thing to do, and it's capped anyway at 120,000, which is peanuts for people who've got ongoing family problems for the rest of their lives or bereavements. It needs to be completely reformed.
Well, you mentioned Lisa Shaw just now, who was a BBC presenter up in the Newcastle area, very successful. The BBC fell weirdly silent about her death once it had occurred. There wasn't any. She's one of their own. She sat next to them every day, and yet the BBC, she's there in the office, and then one day she's not in the office and she's dead, and you would think that alone would make it an interesting story for the BBC to cover. Yet it isn't. There's a code of silence that has fallen on all these victims.
I think what they're terrified of is inducing vaccine hesitancy and putting people off having the vaccine. And I think if everybody knew that the government was coming clean with everyone and saying that, yes, there are some very, very rare side effects, we acknowledge that. Not only do we acknowledge it, but when there are side effects, we will look after you. We will take care of you. You will be okay. We will acknowledge that. I mean, £37 billion, for goodness sake, went to track and trace. There must be plenty of money around to be able to pay quite a small number of people. And I think that would stop vaccine hesitancy. It's supposed to be informed consent. Where's the informed bit?
Yeah. I mean, it's so different from, the way you would do it with Crime Watch or say You and Yours. When you start an investigation, you assume they're occasionally bad actors, but you don't find yourself thinking there's a whole determination to crush and kill the thing from the top that you can't get out from under. I mean, this is very different from the glory days of consumer programs and the like, isn't it?
Exactly. You used to champion ordinary people, ordinary regular people. You champion them, and if they're being dumbed down in some way, you make sure that it's given airtime, and you do something about it, and you campaign, and you win your campaign, hopefully. Certainly the BBC used to win its campaigns, but nobody's campaigning for people who need it now. It's really sad. And these people matter. These are real lives, people who are really suffering.
And as you noted last time, Ofcom itself, which is the regulator and is now about to take over regulation of the internet, has not been any fan of open, vigorous public discourse on this. I so wish you were hosting some of these shows, Sue, because you are the perfect mainstream face to get the. When you mentioned Charlotte Wright, her husband had a great job at start a great job at Ormond Street Hospital, Great Ormond Street Hospital, and for a year and a half. She's basically lost the breadwinner of her family and is trying to bring up 2 young kids. These are terrible stories, and no one wants to hear from them. Terrible.
Well, I'm hoping
Thank you very much, Sue. It's great. Yeah, you should. I would encourage that.
What we can do.
No, we need that. She's the perfect face for this campaign. I've just been doing a bit of it, but I'm like an extreme madman. Sue is the voice of sanity. If you don't believe Sue Cook, there's something wrong with you. Thank you very much there, Sue. Let's stump it out. What do we got here? Philip says the World Economic Forum is just a think tank. Why do you make it out it secretly controls the world? Because the think tank thing is just a front. You heard, I'm not even saying anything. He said it on camera. What was his thing? The future will be made by us. He said it himself on camera. James says, do you think the monkeypox is a pretense for joining the WHO treaty? No, I think 200 governments have signed up for the World Health Organization treaty. The monkeypox is just your signature signing bonus. So look for all these guys to break out in, Boris Johnson, this new guy in Australia, Joe Biden. Joe Biden is in bad enough shape as it is. He doesn't really need massive pustules on his face, but he's going to be getting massive pustules on his face. That's. Are you allowed to talk about Joe Biden breaking out in pustules before the watershed? I've just done it. John says, which gender is the monkey mask, Mark? That gorilla mask I was wearing, I believe, is a non-binary gorilla. I myself am thinking of identifying as a non-binary gorilla because I think it'll get me ahead for the enable me to get ahead in the queue when I need to go to the ICU for my monkeypox. I feel I'm coming down with the monkeypox just watching all that stuff from the World Economic Forum. We will be back with you, but that's going to do it for tonight. Here he is, folks, to massage your Monday like nobody's business. The one and only Dan Wootton. Hi to you, Dan.
Good evening,
Look at that healthy glow. No monkeypox on Dan.
Yet, but no, I am talking about it tonight. I have to say, Mark, I did love your analysis earlier in the show, though, about the Australian election. But I do just find it very hard to celebrate ScoMo being out, even though he got so much wrong, because Labour, the Australian Labour Party, I mean, they are literally the biggest lockdown zealots in the world. They wanted to turn individual Australian states into zones that no one could pass. By the way, even if your husband was dying of cancer in the hospital just 200 metres away. So I think Australia's in big trouble, Mark, and it was fascinating analysis. But tonight we are looking at this World Health Organization Accord that is being discussed right now in Geneva, Switzerland. The Professor of Evidence-Based Medicine, Carl Hennigan from Oxford University, will speak out for the first time. And let's just say, Mark, this is a man who only follows the evidence, and there is no evidence that suggests this accord or treaty is a sensible thing. So he'll be on the show tonight, plus Nigel Farage and Neil Oliver as well.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Further showers during the next 24 hours for many of us. Some clear spells in between the downpours overnight. A cool night to come as well under any clear skies. But low pressure dominating the weather at the moment. One to the north, one clearing away from the southeast. And that means it will remain pretty unsettled. Certainly some heavy rain around for the Midlands, central southern England, and then into the southeast during Monday evening. That only slowly pushing through by the early hours of Tuesday. Further showers just about anywhere else. Some more prolonged rain for northeast Scotland perhaps, but a few clear spells emerging, particularly in the north and particularly inland. And as a result, well, temperatures will fall away. A fresh start to Tuesday, but a bright start in many spots. Now, quite quickly, showers will get going once again, especially inland this time, and in the south, they'll be very lively with a mix of hail and thunder for some. But away from the showers, a few bright spells, particularly in the west, particularly later on, and temperatures around average. 18 for London, 17 for Cardiff, 16 for Glasgow and Belfast. Now into the evening, a clearer slot of weather arrives from the west, but only for a time. Enough time to allow temperatures to dip away into the mid to low single figures for Scotland, for central parts of England and the east. But by the morning, further spells of rain push into the north and the west, and by this stage we'll see a strengthening wind. So a wet and windy start for Scotland, Northern Ireland, northern and western England as well as Wales. Drier and brighter for the east of England, but even here it will turn cloudy and breezy by the afternoon and it will stay cool. But the persistent rain on Wednesday turns to showers by the afternoon, and on Thursday another spell of rain moves into northern areas, pushing south, replaced again by showers. Drier on Friday.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here. You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online,